From the Opupco Studios in Oklahoma City, you're watching The Press Row. I'm Jenny Carlson here with Barry Trammell. Time for our inbox segment. Your questions from email answered here on video. Barry, let's get right to it. We'll start with a question from David. David says, I don't have a problem with the new targeting rule in college football, except when the defensive player looks like he plans his hit below the head shoulders area and then the offensive player lowers his head just before impact. The defensive player is always called for this hit. Great point.
It is a great point, and I tell you, if you watch football, nobody leads with their head more than guys carrying the ball. Now, if you're a receiver coming across the middle, something like that, yeah, those guys get popped pretty good. But guys carrying the ball, one of their first instincts when the defenders converge is lower that head and pound away. So I think it's a great point. I think it's something that needs to be addressed. But the truth of football on all levels is that if you've got the ball, you can get away with murder. Hands to the face, blows to the head. That applies to anybody unless you have the ball, and then you can commit mayhem. Look how many times you see a stiff arm right up in the face mask, never called. So it's a great point, and one I think needs to be addressed.
Well, and this is, I think, it goes back to the fact that football, you mentioned at all levels, lets the offensive guy get away with stuff. I think football at all levels is also looking for ways to try to take some of the danger out of the sport. You know, when you talk about this concussion rash that has hit the NFL, we know it's trickling down to all levels as players get hurt. And I think more and more you're seeing leagues and levels trying to find ways to eliminate that. And this is just one more way. I think it does need to be addressed because, Barry, as you said, it's just instinct for that offensive guy to lower the head to try to take the contact a little bit better. And I don't think the defensive player deserves to be penalized. And we're talking about ejections, too. So this is pretty serious. All right, back to the inbox, and this one from Larry. Larry says, I think even more important to Oklahoma and the football program than finding additional defensive linemen especially is also offensive linemen, the hiring of the right coaches. Hiring Bill Bedenbaugh was a huge step in that direction. Bedenbaugh, I think, is how you actually say it. I'll get used to it eventually, maybe by the fall. What do you think about this, Barry?
Well, I mean, I like the optimism. New coaches, and this is one of the reasons you hire a new coach. Just get everybody excited, and that includes the players. The idea that Bedenbaugh is going to be some magical tonic, I don't see it. I think James Patton was a solid football coach. Maybe Bedenbaugh is his equal, but maybe not. The truth is, sometimes you make change just to stir things up. I think that's what Bob Stoops did with his staff. I think he just said, you know what, some complacency has set in. I'm not going to fire myself. Can't fire the players. I've run off some, but I can't fire them all. We're going to change some staff members. And I think Larry's enthusiasm here is sort of the example of that. Just get everybody excited about a new leaf.
Well, and I think Larry brings up a good point, too, here in saying that maybe they don't necessarily need to bring in new talent. The new coaches might be the answer. New coaches are going to help maybe bring in some talent. I think, when you talk about new blood, that's new recruiting blood too, and guys that are, maybe looked at a little differently. It's not the same face coming through the door of every of those high schools that those other assistants had come through all the time. So maybe that helps. Maybe his enthusiasm for this new job creates enthusiasm among recruits, and maybe they do get some better players. I think that when you look at the firings, you have to say that was a big part of this, is that Oklahoma wanted to recruit better, wanted to try to really beat the bushes for better recruits. And I think when you look at, Jackie Shipp going, James Patton going, Bruce Kittle going, that has a lot to do with it. So a lot of what Bedenbaugh and anybody else that's on that staff now is going to be charged with doing. It's coming up with better players. All right, back to the inbox, and this one from Jim. Jim says, OSU fan I am, but that was some bad basketball against Kansas. Neither team deserved to win this game. In all, I don't see the quality of basketball this season overall for the whole country that I have seen in the past. Interesting question here, Barry.
Yeah, and you know what? I can't disagree with him. I mean, the Big 12 title in some ways was on the line for OSU Kansas, and it was not a great played game. Not a lot of offense, some bad shooting, some poor play. But I just think that's where we are in college basketball, and it was fiercely contested Wednesday night in Stillwater, and an entertaining game in that regard. I've never seen a game where 5 points was the biggest margin for Kansas, 3 points for OSU. I figured it up. They played 50 minutes. 46 minutes and 30 seconds of that was a one-possession game. So, I mean, the drama was huge. but the quality of play was not, and I think that's just something we're going to have to live with for a while in college basketball until certain parameters change.
We might have said this last year if not for Kentucky. I think Kentucky was so far out ahead of the pack and played such great basketball that you really didn't see it as a bad year for quality of basketball in the nation. And I think maybe they sort of kept us from seeing this trend a little bit sooner. I don't think you're ever going to see the great basketball of the past. As long as you've got one and dones and guys leaving early and some of the things that we have right now in college basketball and college basketball officiated the way it is, I think it's going to be this way and we're going to have to live with it. And frankly, I think it's kind of fun. I mean, you talk about a game that had so many minutes of one possession ball, maybe we should just embrace it and enjoy it. Back to the inbox, this one from Paul. Paul says, after watching the Thunder play for the past month, does it make sense to try to package maybe Kendrick Perkins, Jeremy Lamb, and a first-round draft pick in exchange for Kevin Garnett? Or is this just a desperation thought? Barry, we've seen the trade deadline come and go. No deal is out there involving these guys, but what about this suggestion?
Well, I would say this suggestion is desperation thought. Yeah, you know what, Kevin Garnett he'd be good for almost any team. The Clippers certainly expressed interest in him. I think he'd be a good fit for almost anybody. But the truth of the matter is that the financial parameters have to work. The money's got to make sense in this day and age in the NBA. And Kevin Garnett makes a pretty hefty salary. I think he's $11-12 million a year, but he's got it's not an expiring contract. So the Thunder has to think about next year and beyond. And as much as they would like a talent like Kevin Garnett, I just don't think the money works. We didn't see any of the major players make a significant deal. The Spurs didn't, the Clippers didn't, the Heat didn't, the Thunder didn't, the Pacers didn't, the Knickerbockers. All these teams did not. None of these teams made a deal, and I think there's massive concern over the impending luxury tax. I think you're going to see a lot more stability going into trade deadlines.
Well, and if the Knicks are concerned about the money out there with the CBA, if the Heat is concerned, the Thunder's got to be concerned about this, folks. Remember, small market team, they just don't have the margin for error. You look at something like their TV contract and the money that the Knicks say have in their TV deal gives them so much more leeway than the Thunder has. They have millions to play with if they have a luxury tax they have to pay, and the Thunder just doesn't have that money. So they really have to be careful of that. If other teams are mindful, the Thunder's going to be mindful, and I think that's a big reason, probably the main reason, that we didn't see the Thunder pull the trigger on any deals at the trade deadline. Hey, be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoma.